Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif says that Pakistan is very hopeful for finalizing a deal with the IMF this month. In his interview with the international news agency, he said, let me quote, "We have met all conditionalities. I repeat, each and every requirement of the IMF as prior actions has been met," unquote. Earlier, the Prime Minister also talked with the IMF chief, Kristalina Georgieva, on the revival of this stalled IMF bailout program. Later on, we saw the IMF mission chief in Pakistan, Nathan Porter, said, let me quote, "The IMF remains in touch with Pakistan's authorities in order to pave the way for a board meeting before the financing program expires at the end of June," unquote. Now, Finance Minister Senator Ishaq Dar had said that the IMF wants the details of the upcoming budget, and the government will provide the details to them. As we all know, the federal government is going to unveil the federal budget for the next fiscal year on 9th of June. All eyes are set on this particular budget. What is a most probable layout going to be of this particular budget? And also in other news, we have seen Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif chairing some high-level meetings, one particularly related to the energy-related budgetary proposals, and also the promotion of IT sector and enhancing the IT exports. The Prime Minister has also informed the coalition partners that the government plans to enhance the public sector development from 700 billion rupees to 950 billion rupees. Also, he's also directed the concerned authorities to give incentives to the poor in the upcoming budget. Also, in today's program, we are going to talk about the revival of this stalled IMF program, and also what are the expectations from this upcoming budget. For that, we are honored to have been joined in the studio by Dr. Manzoor Ahmad. He is Trade Arbitrator, a World Trade Organization. Dr. Manzoor, thank you very much for taking time out. And we are also honored to have been joined in the studio by Dr. Shimail Daud, his former president, Rawalpindi Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Dr. Shimail, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on Views on News tonight. Really appreciate that. And on Skype at the same time, we are being joined by Dr. Aqdas Afzal. He is senior economist. Dr. Aqdas, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on Views on News tonight. We really appreciate that. Let me begin the discussion with you, Dr. Manzoor. Now, the Prime Minister seems very hopeful that Pakistan will be getting a good news for the revival of this particular IMF program during this particular month. Earlier, he talked to the IMF chief himself, also urging the IMF to revive this stalled program. Very high hopes. How crucial is unlocking this particular tranche of this stalled program by the IMF?
Well, it is indeed very crucial, and the fact that the Prime Minister is so much hopeful, he must have some assurance from IMF. Although when IMF Resident Rep or others, they said we are in touch with the government of Pakistan. They didn't go beyond that. But the fact that the Prime Minister is so hopeful, I'm sure something is going to work out, because this has been pending for the last several months. I think from November. And this also is not just that 1.9 or 2, whatever 2 point some billion left, but it also unlocks other funds. So it's quite important, for Pakistan to get.
Dr. Shimail, what's your understanding of this entire equation? Quite several months now, this particular program has been stalled. Now, quite high hopes, as per the statement of the Prime Minister. How do you understand this?
Thank you so much for having me. Well, I think, as rightly pointed out by Dr. Saab, there were strict requirements, preconditions. The government made sure that we abide by those requirements, and we have taken very harsh steps as far as the public is concerned, because there was all those mini budget taxes were raised and the revenue measures were taken. Petroleum levy was done, subsidies were removed, so forth and so on. So all those strict and stringent actions, preconditions were met, from our friendly governments and countries. The budget deficits that were not going to be filled by this tranche we were also given those assurances. So I think definitely this stalemate has, I would say, boggled many people, and this delay has strained our financial situation further, specifically for raising further funds where we were already under a lot of pressure for the balance of payments. We are hopeful that, as Dr. Sab said, that as soon as this ninth review, and we are hearing that there is a possibility of combining. However, the funds, if they are released, they will uncouple and release our multilateral and bilateral funds from other funding agencies, because we will require going forward, and I'm sure that this part of the budget proposals, this has been factored in, that where we are going to be filling, in case of current account deficit or fiscal deficit. So, although I do hear that the plan is such that the government proposal so far are focused on trying to either have no current account deficit or as close as possible to a zero current account deficit. However, there is going to be a fiscal deficit for sure, and that definitely will require further raising of funds. Specifically, we are we have a high debt, and we have to make our principal payments in our in the coming financial year.
So, Dr. Shimail, what's your understanding of the basic factors that led to such a long delay of this?
I think because of, I would say that because there was change of guard, there was change of approach. If we look at, the previous government had multiple people who were taking care of these negotiations at the finance ministry. We did see stability, and then we saw that there was an expansion sort of approach, which then resulted into spiraling out in terms of our costs and our losses. So I think that definitely factored in, because if there is a consistency, and if there is a smooth sort of leadership at the center, at the federation, at the negotiation table, that definitely helps. So all of that kind of, I think, in my view, I may be wrong, but in my view, that has definitely delayed a lot of the decision making and the toiling between
the trust deficit because of the policies and backtracking of the previous government also.
Yes, I think, and I think that as I was saying, that a lot of people agree that we've done all those preconditions, we've made sure that we stick to them. I think we're kind of under scrutiny at the same time, where the the fund is also looking at that this time we don't backtrack, and that's why they are focusing on looking at the budget as well, and obviously they want to make sure that the political government doesn't make any steps where they again backtrack in terms of giving subsidies or which look politically and populist decisions. So I think that is kind of resulting into those delays, but it has definitely impacted overall the situation. Right. Hoping that this is going to be revived and we will come out of this.
Right. Dr. Aqdas, what's your understanding of the major factors that have led to the delay of this particular program? The Prime Minister, as per his statements, seems very hopeful. Earlier talked to the IMF chief himself, urging for the revival of this stalled program. What's your understanding of the entire scenario?
I think, thank you very much for taking me on the show. I think the main reason for the delay, and I'm saying this assuming that, what the Prime Minister has said, and he did sound extremely optimistic, and that I hope will translate into a staff level agreement for Pakistan. So I say this with against the backdrop of this assumption that the Prime Minister has knowledge about the ongoing negotiations with the IMF that at least I don't have, but he definitely appeared extremely optimistic. So the number one reason behind this delay that has come about, I think there were two main reasons. And I think the number one reason was that the government of Pakistan and the IMF were not able to come to terms or see eye to eye as to the amount of external financing Pakistan had to show they had access to. And you will remember that initially there was a conflict on how much external financing Pakistan was going to require. I mean, the Pakistani authorities, the Ministry of Finance was consistently saying that since the current account deficit this year was going to be below $5 billion, we are not going to require upwards of $7 billion in external financing, whereas the IMF was pretty, how should I say, set on the idea that Pakistan needed to show about $7 billion in external financing. And I think as the year has progressed, I mean, we are now 100 days removed, or we have traversed 100 days since the IMF mission was here and they left without signing an SLA. I think the situation has emerged in such a way that now the two positions seem to be converging. I mean, when it comes to the IMF, they have probably realized that Pakistan does not need to show $7 billion in external financing. And Pakistani authorities, Ministry of Finance, have realized that they need to show upwards of the amount they were initially showing to the IMF. So I think there has been a meeting of the minds when it comes to how much money there is going to be required for external financing. That's number one. And I think the number two reason has to do with geopolitics. And I think there is an increasing realization on part of the IMF and certain allies of the IMF or backers of the IMF that if Pakistan is not helped during these very trying times that this country is now facing, this could push Pakistan towards certain other countries. And I think this is definitely not something that the IMF and its international backers would like to see, at least in the medium term. So I think these are two big reasons why we now see a renewed interest by the IMF and renewed statements by the Pakistan government stating that there is a higher probability of Pakistan ending up with a staff level agreement, which I would at least welcome wholeheartedly.
Right. Dr. Aqdas, when we talk about this statement by Prime Minister that we have met all conditionalities, I repeat, each and every requirement of the IMF, its prior actions have been met. And we also saw Senator Aqdas saying the IMF wants the budget details regarding that, which Pakistan would definitely share with them. After all these conditions being met by the government authorities here in Pakistan, so how likely do you think there is a high hope of revival of this particular program as per the statement of the Prime Minister during this month?
I have been hopeful about an agreement between Pakistan and IMF from the very start. I think I'm one of the few analysts who have been consistently saying that Pakistan is not going to default, that Pakistan is going to end up signing an agreement with the IMF. Pakistan isn't going to default, even if we don't get to sign an agreement with the IMF, at least not in the short term. So at least I have been consistently hopeful about Pakistan's economy, and I again I'm now optimistic because the Prime Minister has been very careful. He has chosen his words very carefully in the past. So now, if the Prime Minister is actually indicating that some progress has been made vis-a-vis signing a staff-level agreement with the IMF, I take that very seriously, and I think it indicates that the probability of an actual agreement between Pakistan and IMF has risen significantly.
Right. Dr. Manzoor, what's your understanding of this particular statement by Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif when he says that in case this particular bailout program is not revived, the Pakistani people had faced challenges in the past and if needed would tighten our belt and rise again? What could be the possible repercussions of this?
Yes, in case it doesn't come through, it should be another tough year. Let's see. I mean, like last year, for example, we didn't get it, so we had to really compress imports. That means we had to shut down many industries. Our GDP growth, with although not like India or Bangladesh, but still it was expected to be more around 3%, 3.5%. It came down to 0.2 to 3%. That means another 40 million people pushed below poverty line, so much more in unemployment. And then because our these industries and other things are not functioning at the best level, so the inflation has remained very high, 36, 38%. And unfortunately, all this came at a very difficult time because we had this floods, unprecedented floods. And the damage, not only from Pakistan's estimate, but international, they have estimated that at least 15 billion of damage, 15 billion of reconstruction. So $13 billion is a huge amount. So I think it's and I think one other problem maybe with IMF that if you look at the previous record, Pakistan's previous record, when it comes to the budget year, the governments open up their coffers. I mean, there are subsidies and there is, they do all sorts of things because then there's election year. So that's why I think they, perhaps, I feel, they delayed it to look at the budget figures and to see, if it is, and also every now and then I think we try to control the dollar, and that's their red line. We recently also between the official.
But the government later on removed that cap also.
Right? Cap moved, yes, it did. But every now and then, yes, they did. That took a few months. But every now and then, government still does something. The gap goes.
It's been quite a couple of months now that the government had removed that price cap.
Yes, but recently, if you looked at.
There's a difference of almost 15
yes,
plus 20.
And there was a substantial difference.
Dr. Manzoor, as you already mentioned, that Pakistan had to face the unprecedented floods and the damage incurred out of those floods, around $30 billion as per the international estimates.
Yes.
Despite the international community knowing that, international community giving the calls, especially urging the IMF to give Pakistan some sort of a space for the recovery, sustainable recovery, do you see also a geopolitical dimension associated with this delay, as Mr. Aqdas was alluding to?
Geopolitics, is always there. Behind the scene, it's there, and because the big powers like US has a big influence on IMF, World Bank. So obviously that is there, because in the past we have seen that whenever the relationship was good, the IMF, etc., they would come immediately. Whenever something happened, there's not only in Pakistan, that's been happening to other countries as well. So geopolitics is there, yes.
Right. Dr. Shimail, your understanding, is there any geopolitical dimension associated with this delay also?
I think definitely, because the way things have been moving, we have been for the past couple of years focused on the CPAC. We have recently looked into our relationships with other countries that we did not consider in the past, or at least not for a long period of time. So these, in the context of the war taking place in Ukraine, definitely has a shadow on that. But I agree with Dr. Aqdas earlier on that despite this delay, it shouldn't have been delayed that much. I think it is maybe a blessing in disguise that as a country we have survived, we have performed well despite all those hardships, and that is why the Prime Minister sounded hopeful that despite all those hardships and the delays of the tranches that we wanted, that should have arrived late last year, we did all right. I mean, we still didn't go negative despite less than 1% GDP. So I think there is an elasticity, as would economists would say that, and I think IMF probably is starting to realize that, as Dr. Aqdas was saying, that they can delay it, but there is, after a certain period of time, we're also learning our lessons, and maybe
in case
we can improve. So having said that, obviously our friendly governments and our relationships with them have also stood the test of time, and they have helped us. Rollovers, support, and all those sorts of external facilities were rolled over, and that kind of helped. Going forward, I think the recent changes that we've seen in terms of the Ministry of Commerce looking at trade in trading with barter trade with countries in the region, I think that is a sort of approach I would welcome, not only for looking alternates in terms of our imports, as we are now looking at oil and LNG from other countries that we were not considering in the past. But having this sort of barter, or where our dependence on the expensive currencies is not there, I think that definitely can decrease the pressure on the Pak rupee against the US dollar currency basket.
Right, Dr. Aqdas, if this particular program is not revived, the Prime Minister says the Pakistani people have faced challenges in the past and if needed would tighten our belt. What does this particular thing mean, tightening our belt? How the government and the Pakistani people are going to tighten their belt? What are going to be the possible repercussions if this particular program is not revived?
Well, my first hope and prayer is that Pakistan is able to ink this agreement with the IMF, and I think that is going to be good for Pakistan, for stabilizing Pakistan's economy, especially towards the second quarter of the next fiscal year. So, we are talking about October onwards. Assuming that Pakistan is not able to ink an agreement with the IMF, there are going to be difficulties. For example, there might be Pakistan could run out of foreign exchange reserves. I wouldn't say that Pakistan is going to run out of foreign exchange reserves, because certain safety protocols or circuit breakers are going to be brought into action much earlier than that. But I think in terms of more import compression, having an impact on GDP, compressing GDP, resulting in negative job creation, I think these are some of the things that are going to start impacting Pakistani people if Pakistan is not able to ink this agreement by, the second quarter of the next fiscal year. So still, there is room for the Pakistani economy. And like I said, there are many safety protocols and circuit breakers that come into action if the economy goes below or goes into a situation whereby there is a concerning situation. So I think Pakistani policymakers and Pakistan's political leadership is going to be able to take Pakistan out of these very, very severe economic, once in a generation economic challenges that we are facing.
Right. Dr. Manzoor Ahmad, now when we talk about Prime Minister also took into confidence the coalition partners regarding whatever the plans the present government has. Now, regarding the PSDP, he has informed them that it's going to be enhanced from 700 billion rupees to 950 billion rupees, specifically to increase the GDP growth and provide jobs. How important a step do you think that one is?
Yeah, this plays quite a major role in growth of the economy, because spending it multiplies. When the government spends 900 billion, then it brings in another 900 or more from that side. Brings employment and all these things, productivity, etc. The problem, I think, is that the government maybe it's looking at the spending side, but I didn't see much on the saving side. For example, the steel mill keep going on, and at least 50 billion a year dumping in. So is PIA and things like that. These state-owned enterprises. Then there are lots of other wastage, like after this 18th Amendment, many of these divisions were to go to the provinces, and they're created there, but they still stay in the central government. So a lot of this expenditure that could also be controlled. While if they are spending more on PSDP, then they should also try to cut some.
So what about conservation or saving that might be taken from the energy sector, going for the alternate energy sources, also cutting and controlling the line losses and the theft of electricity also?
Yes. Energy is one of the most important sector, because the highest spending goes on that, and there's a lot of wastage, line losses, there's lots of other wastage. For example, previously we were using a lot of this furnace oil, etc., which is far more expensive. So energy sector, if the government can focus and reform this sector, that could make it. For example, this K Electric, that has been going through this privatization process for the last many years, I think, this Chinese company, and it's still going on. I mean, you know, some of these things, they need to close them down now. Close mean, I mean, they need to, whatever, they need to take it to sea, and it's been many years now.
So, what about the solarization, especially of the public buildings? Now, the Prime Minister has been informed that 4 phases of solarization of public buildings has been completed. Do you think this particular step is going to reduce Pakistan's dependency on the imported fuel?
Sorry,
the solarization of the public buildings, the 4 phases of it has already been completed. There has been briefing given to the Prime Minister by the authorities.
I think in case of energy, as Dr. Shimail was just saying, this if they open up more sources for import, that will bring down the prices. Like in case of Iran, they already completed this line. I don't remember the name of that transmission line. Within
IPI
a record,
or IP.
Within a record period of 6 months. So these things can make a big difference. You know, in our border regions, and there's Central Asia, China, there's excess electricity. So, you know, for the time being, and it's much cheaper. So they can bring that. And also, you know, for this LNG and this, now they are exploring with already Russia, it's on the way, but LNG, they are just negotiating. So all these things can bring down the cost.
Right, the solarization. How do you see that, Dr. Shimail? What's your understanding of reducing Pakistan's dependency on the imported fuel?
That's definitely the way to go. I think the trend has picked up in the last couple of years, but you have to understand that it will require an investment by a lot of the, you know, we are obviously still faced with the balance of payment issues with the currency and everything. So we have to import these solar panels. We do not manufacture them. So that definitely is going to be a challenge. However, once that the installed capacity is gone up anyfold, I think that definitely is the way to go, and it can definitely splice off a large chunk of you know, our cost. But the time before it actually comes to on the grid or impacts the grid will take longer. The government in the past, I think, did give subsidies in terms of lending to the banks, and they gave at low interest rates. So I do not know that if that's going to be included in the budget. However, that is the way to go, because the line losses, and specifically even if the installed capacity is there, the capacity for the transmission is not there. So having, you know, local production is definitely way to go. But yeah, eventually, if we can start producing our own solar panels.
So what's required for that?
That definitely requires a transfer of technology. It's something that can be done, just like automobiles or other industries that have been set up. I think it's not something that is not it's impossible or something. However, there is going to be a lag period. But in the short term, yes, if the government you know, promotes this, the law, the regulations of different building codes promotes this. In fact, I would even suggest it makes it compulsory that new construction should have installed you know, solar panels or water conservation. I think these are the two important elements where this should be included.
So
in
what
the
about
code.
the solarization of the tube wells?
Yes, tube wells for the agri, you know, agri, definitely. That's the way to go, because that's a huge cost for the farmers, and you know, it's a major cost in terms of, you know, middle of Punjab, and where they do not have access to fresh water.
Right, Dr. Aqdas, what's your understanding of this, the solarization, particularly of the public buildings, the 4 phases of which have already been completed as per the government authorities? How do you see that step, and do you think that solarization as an avenue in the future is going to be helpful for Pakistan to reduce its dependency on the imported fuel?
I see the ongoing solarization initiative very positively. I think it was a need of the hour. Because if you look at the balance of payments statement from the last few years, say the last 10 years, the single item that keeps growing exponentially is basically all the energy that we have to import. And that basically is what has created the kind of pressure that we see on our exchange rate. I mean, let me take you back to last year, initiation of hostilities between Russia and Ukraine. And the fact that the Pakistani economy went through the kind of problems that it went through last year was basically because of the spike in international oil prices and because of our dependence on international sources of energy. So I think this is an extremely important step. I think this will go a very long way in not only reducing our dependence on imported sources of energy, and that's a strategic dimension, but also creating the kind of space that we need in Pakistan in terms of the fiscal space to spend more money on human development. So that's the economic development and how should I say, human capital.
Right. Right, Dr. Aqdas, Afzal, I'll come back to you to discuss a couple of other points later. Dr. Manzoor, when we talk about the IT sector, has been talked about. It has almost become the talk of the town now. Today, Prime Minister chaired a high-level meeting regarding promotion of the IT sector in Pakistan also. Now, he has also directed the concerned authorities to go for fixed tax regime. First of all, could you shed a little bit of light on this fixed tax regime? How does it work, and how is it going to help in enhancing the exports of the IT sector?
Fixed tax on export, you mean? No, fixed tax
regime on IT.
Oh, IT. I think the best thing would have been that IT, they should let it. I mean, it's very extremely difficult to tax. First of all, when you tax this, the IT regime. And most of our exporters of IT are outsourced. They prefer to keep the money outside. So government doesn't really get that much. And for this reason, most countries, the normal income tax regime, they could be whatever they are earning. But putting some tax on that export, etc., I think it's not a good idea.
But at the same time, the government plans to incentivize this particular sector to enhance the estimated target of $4.5 billion in exports, like giving the laptops, training of the youth also in this particular sector, also mentioning that around 45,000 students are already being trained in this particular field.
Yeah, laptops, etc., help, but that's
the training programs also
a long term. I mean, the government can take several other steps to take major steps to, for example, what do they call, they have a limit on the IT, I forget the name, but IT sector, there are many things that government can do without really spending any money and open it up, and perhaps that is the way to go. I forget the particular things, but there are many blocks in the way of this IT telecom company. Pakistan's telecom sector and mobile, etc., they are some of the highest taxed within, compared to any other country. So, if this could be, if government wants to give more incentive, then it has to bring these down.
So the government also plans to establishing the IT zones for this particular matter.
Yes, but that's
also incentivizing this.
Yes. But it's been the plan has been there for years, but they need to expedite it now.